sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
All right, strap yourselves in because today we are diving into a day just crammed full of confirmation hearings.
All happening right now as we speak.
Yep, January 29th, 2025.
Yeah.
President Trump's first week back in office, and it is already proving to be quite a whirlwind.
It is.
And we are going to focus on 3 nominees today in particular. RFK Jr. for Health and Human Services, Pam Bondi for Attorney General, and Howard Lutnick for Commerce Secretary.
And we've got a mountain of information to get through.
We do.
Live updates from Fox News Digital covering everything, public statements, reactions, even some really interesting personal details about these nominees.
It's like watching a political thriller, but it's actually happening in real time. And you're here to help us make sense of it all.
Absolutely.
Break it down.
We'll unpack the headlines, figure out the why behind all the buzz, and most importantly, what it all means for you.
Perfect. Let's jump right in.
Okay.
First things first, can you give us a quick overview of the day itself? It's not just any Tuesday in Washington, is it?
It is not. We've got multiple high-profile confirmation hearings happening simultaneously, which is pretty unusual. And remember, this is all going on in the midst of a very busy first week back for President Trump. He's already signed a new bill into law, the Laken-Riley Act, which focuses on immigration enforcement. So there's a lot of energy, a lot of momentum building. And today really has the potential to be a pivotal moment in shaping his administration.
So this is a big day.
Absolutely.
All right, let's zoom in on our first nominee, Pam Bondi, nominated for Attorney General. What's the latest with her hearing?
Well, things are moving quickly with Bondi. Fox News Digital is reporting that her nomination has already been voted out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it was a straight party line vote. It's now heading to a full Senate vote, and from what we're seeing in the sources, it looks like she's likely to be confirmed.
Okay, so she's facing a pretty clear path to confirmation.
Right.
But it hasn't been entirely smooth sailing, has it?
It hasn't. We're seeing 2 very distinct narratives coming out from the sources. On the one hand, you have supporters praising Bondi's experience as Florida's Attorney General. They point to her track record of bipartisanship and her focus on fighting crime.
Okay.
And they're confident she'll bring that same approach to the national level.
And then on the other hand, what are the critics saying?
Well, critics like Senator Durbin are voicing some concerns about her loyalty to Trump. They worry that these close ties could hinder the independence of the Department of Justice.
Okay.
They're concerned we could see a politicization of the DOJ, with decisions being influenced by political considerations rather than pure legal judgment.
So that's a valid concern. And, you know, it's kind of ironic in a way.
Yeah.
Because Fox News Digital quoted one of Bondi's former colleagues saying that she's going to make America safe again.
Right.
With a back-to-basics approach. But then you have these worries about politicization, which seems to contradict that back-to-basics idea.
Yeah, it definitely raises some questions. It makes you wonder about that balance between loyalty and independent judgment, especially for a role as crucial as Attorney General. And I think that's a theme we're going to see playing out with a lot of these other nominees as well.
That's a really good point. All right, let's move on to our next nominee, Howard Lutnick.
Okay.
Up for Commerce Secretary.
Yep.
And it sounds like his hearing is just getting underway, so we might have less information to work with at this point.
We do. But one thing that jumps out immediately from the Fox News coverage is Lutnick's relationship with Trump. They're describing him as a longtime friend of the president. They even mentioned that he was introduced at the hearing by Vice President Vance himself.
Wow. So a very close personal connection, which could be really significant, right? Not just for his nomination, but for how smoothly his confirmation process might go.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of his background, Lutnick is the chairman and CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, a major financial services firm. He's had a long and successful career in business, and he's already made a commitment to divest from his company if he is confirmed.
And Fox News also shared a really powerful story about Lutnick's experience during 9/11.
Yes.
He lost his brother and hundreds of his colleagues in the attacks, and he was instrumental in rebuilding Cantor Fitzgerald in the aftermath.
Yes, and he actually spoke about that experience during his opening statement at the hearing. It seems to have made a real impact on the committee members.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's talk a little bit about his policy positions. What have we heard so far?
Well, one topic that he's been vocal about is stablecoins.
Okay.
He's advocating for them to be backed by U.S. treasuries, fully audited, and subject to stricter regulations. This is Particularly interesting given his firm's connection to Tether, which has faced scrutiny in the past.
And I'm guessing Senator Warren, given her history of criticizing Tether, probably had some pointed questions for him about that.
She did. She brought up her concerns about Tether's past involvement in potentially shady dealings.
Right.
We're talking allegations of financing North Korean nuclear weapons programs and Russian arms companies. Pretty serious stuff.
Wow. A whole other deep dive right there.
Right?
But getting back to Lutnick and the Commerce Department, it feels like this role could be especially crucial given all the global stuff going on right now.
Absolutely.
You know, we've got China making huge strides in AI, talk of tariffs on semiconductors. The Commerce Secretary is going to have a lot on their plate.
Absolutely. And Lutnick's stance on China has been pretty clear so far. Fox News quoted him saying that China stole U.S. technology to develop their DeepSeek AI model.
Wow.
That's a strong accusation, and it could signal a more confrontational approach towards China under a Trump administration.
Okay, so we've covered Bondi and Lutnick. Now let's move on to the nominee who seems to be generating the most buzz, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. For Health and Human Services. From what we're seeing in the live updates, his hearing is already underway. And it is shaping up to be the most contentious of the day. We're seeing protests outside the hearing room and strong reactions from both supporters and critics. This is where things get really interesting.
It is. It's fascinating.
Yeah, you've got a Democrat being embraced by the MAGA crowd, causing friction even within his own family. It's a whole political drama in itself. Where do we even begin with this one?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge RFK Jr.'s complex history right off the bat. He's a Democrat, but he's found a lot of support amongst Trump's base. This has caused some tension within his family, with his cousin, Caroline Kennedy, even releasing a scathing letter calling him a predator and unfit for office.
Wow. And yet at the same time, you have his supporters at the hearing chanting, "We love you, Bobby."
Right.
It's just a wild mix of opinions, and it speaks to how polarizing he is.
It really does. And of course, the biggest flashpoint, the one that everyone is talking about, is the vaccine debate.
Right, because this is a guy who has basically built a career on questioning vaccine safety. But Fox News reported that he plans to state in his opening remarks that he is not anti-vaccine and that all of his children are vaccinated. How do we square those two things?
That is the million-dollar question. We have to balance his current statements with his long history of controversial claims linking vaccines to autism. And these claims have been repeatedly debunked by the scientific community.
And let's not forget about Children's Health Defense, the organization he founded and led, which has actively campaigned against vaccines. Actions speak louder than words, right?
Exactly. So while he might try to distance himself from the anti-vaccine label now, his actions and past statements tell a more complex story. And it seems like the senators are well aware of this history. Bernie Sanders even brought in those unvaxxed, unafraid Beatty onesies that Children's Health Defense was selling.
Oh, wow.
Which made for a pretty striking visual.
Almost like a prop from a political satire. But this is real life.
Right.
And then you have Senator Warren raising concerns about potential conflicts of interest given RFK Jr.'s involvement in lawsuits against vaccine manufacturers.
Right, that's a key point. It raises questions about whether he can truly be impartial in this role.
Yeah.
Can he separate his personal beliefs and past actions from the decisions he would have to make as the head of the nation's health agency?
It's a lot to unpack, and it seems like public opinion is just incredibly divided. But amidst all this controversy, Fox News quoted Dr. Siegel, a pretty well-known medical expert, predicting that RFK Jr. will likely be confirmed despite all the pushback.
That's interesting.
It is. And Dr. Siegel attributed it partly to RFK Jr.'s alignment with the Make America Healthy Again movement. Really makes you think about the role of these political movements in shaping these confirmation processes.
Yeah. Okay, so we spent a lot of time on the vaccine debate, understandably, given its importance. But what are some of the other key aspects of RFK Jr.'s platform that have come up in the sources?
Well, one that stands out is his focus on combating chronic disease. He's talking about creating wellness farms funded by legalized marijuana sales. This actually ties back to his own personal struggles with addiction. Okay, that's interesting. And how have those ideas been met, support, or opposition?
It's a mixed bag, honestly. Fox News mentioned a letter signed by a group of Nobel laureates opposing his nomination, which is obviously pretty significant.
Yeah.
But then they also dug into the backgrounds of those Nobel laureates and found that a lot of them were major donors to Democratic campaigns.
So it gets murky, right? Is this a genuine concern about RFK Jr.'s qualifications, or is there a political motivation behind it? It's hard to say for sure.
Exactly. It's a reminder that there are always multiple layers to these stories and often a mix of personal beliefs and political calculations at play. And that's what makes these hearings so fascinating to watch. They're not just about filling positions. They're about the interplay of power, ideology, and personal conviction.
Yeah, it's a lot more than meets the eye.
It is.
Yeah.
It really does add another layer to the whole story, doesn't it? It makes you kind of think about the human element a little bit more in these political processes.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've seen these contrasting narratives, political maneuvering, personal stories, and we're even getting some glimpses into what a Trump administration might actually look like in action. It's been quite the roller coaster.
It has. And, these confirmation hearings, they're about so much more than just filling some empty seats. They're really a reflection of where we are right now as a nation. The political climate, the power dynamics, the challenges we're facing, it's all playing out right there on this stage.
It's wild to think just a few hours ago we were talking about these seemingly procedural committee votes for Pam Bondi.
Right.
And now we're seeing protests and chanting crowds at RFK Jr.'s hearing. It's been a very eventful day for our deep dive into these confirmation hearings.
It has been. And it really speaks to that idea we touched on earlier, doesn't it? About how these events highlight that constant push and pull between experience, political loyalty, and personal beliefs when it comes to filling these high-level positions. I mean, you see it with Bondi, lauded for her experience but criticized for her loyalty to Trump. You see it with Lutnick, his close ties to the president potentially smoothing his path to confirmation. And of course, RFK Jr., where his personal beliefs are causing such a stir.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what should matter most when we consider someone for these really powerful positions? Is it their qualifications? Is it their alignment with the president's agenda? Or is it their personal convictions, even when those convictions might be controversial?
Those are great questions. And honestly, there are no easy answers. It's a balancing act, and it seems like each senator has to weigh these factors individually as they cast their votes. But it's something we should all be thinking about, isn't it? What do we prioritize when we consider who holds these positions of power?
Absolutely. And speaking of things to ponder, this whole RFK Jr. situation has really got me thinking. I mean, we spent a good amount of time unpacking his stance on vaccines, his past statements, the reactions from both his supporters and his detractors. And it begs the question, what does it say about where we are politically that someone with his history, someone who's been so controversial, could potentially be leading the nation's health agency?
That's such a good question. And it really speaks to a bigger conversation we need to be having, I think, about the role of personal belief in public service. Should they be completely separate, personal views from professional duties, especially in a role that has such a direct impact on public health? Or is there a point where those personal beliefs become too significant to ignore? Where do we draw that line?
It's a really tough question, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer, but it's definitely something we as citizens need to be aware of and engage with. These hearings, they're not just political theater. They have real-world consequences for all of us.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's why these deep dives are so valuable. We're not just reading the headlines. We're really digging into the nuances, the different perspectives, the complex questions at play. And that's what informed, engaged citizens should be doing.
Well said. And I have to say, you've been such a great guide through this complex landscape. Your insights have been so helpful in helping me and hopefully our listeners understand what's really going on here.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy these deep dives.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this journey. I hope you found it as insightful as I have. But remember, this is just the beginning. These confirmation hearings are still in progress, and these nominees, if confirmed, will have a lasting impact on our nation. So stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged. Thanks for listening. It's really fascinating how all these personal elements kind of weave themselves into the whole political drama.
Yeah.
I mean, we started out talking about these quiet committee votes for Pam Bondi, and now just a couple hours later, we're hearing about chanting crowds and protests at RFK Jr.'s hearing.
It has been a wild day. It really does highlight that thing we were talking about earlier, that tension between experience, political loyalty, and personal beliefs. I mean, that's been a recurring theme with all of these nominees today, hasn't it?
It has. With Bondi, she's got the experience, but will her loyalty to Trump maybe cloud her judgment? Lutnick, while his close relationship with the president seems to be helping him out, and RFK Jr., it's his personal beliefs that are really causing a stir, especially those controversial stances on vaccines.
It really begs the question, what are we really looking for when we're considering people for these incredibly powerful positions? Is it their experience? How closely do their views align with the president? Or do we focus more on their personal convictions, even if they're controversial? It's a really hard question.
It is. And this whole RFK Jr. thing, I mean, we've spent a lot of time today unpacking his stance on vaccines and his past statements and the reactions from both sides, his supporters and his critics. It makes you wonder, what does it say about us, about our current political climate, that someone who has been so controversial with his history could potentially be running the nation's health agency?
That's such a good question. It really speaks to a larger conversation, I think, about personal beliefs and public service. Should they be separate? Personal views and your professional duties, especially in a role that's so directly connected to public health. Or at what point do those personal beliefs become too much to overlook? It's a hard line to draw.
There's no easy answer, that's for sure. But it's definitely something we should all be thinking about as we're watching these hearings and we're thinking about the consequences of who ends up getting confirmed to these positions.
Absolutely. And I think these deep dives are so valuable because we're not just looking at the headlines, we're really thinking about the nuances, the different perspectives, all the different sides of these complex issues. I think that's what we should all be doing as informed and engaged citizens.
Well said. And you have been a fantastic guide today. I mean, your insights have been so helpful. I feel like I understand so much more about what's going on. Hopefully our listeners feel the same.
Thanks. It's been fun.
And to everyone listening, thank you so much for being here with us. I hope you learned something new. But remember, these hearings aren't over yet, and who gets confirmed to these positions is going to have a long-term impact on all of us. So please stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged. Thanks for listening.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll.